I'm hosting this as Donald Taylor of Donald Taylor Services Limited. Stephen Walsh is with us, and he's from Anders Pink, co-founder, and he's going to be taking us through some of the methodologies that he's got, and in fact went into his ebook around curation, and that will be coming in a few slides' time. I've got a couple of things I want to establish before then about content, about what L&D does. Very briefly. First, though, can we move on to the first slide, Stephen? And I just want to ask everybody here a question. So, everybody in the room today, I'd like to ask you what you're currently doing about curation in your organization. Could you just let us know by typing your answers into the chat area? Oh, I'm sorry, I should have said, we also have online with us, excuse me, Michelle Hazelton, who's from Anders Pink, and she'll be supporting Stephen and me in the chat area today, answering some questions in the chat area. Hazel, thank you for introducing yourself. So let's see, what are people doing about curation and learning in your organization today? I like Carmen's answer, simply trying not to overwhelm my colleagues too much. Absolutely fair point. Jamie says, look, we work at Degreed and we use Degreed. And that's the tool you use, Jamie. Let us know. And of course, it's a great tool. How does it work, Jamie? Anything you'd like to share about that? Joe says, I'm doing curation for my courses. If anybody doesn't know, Joe runs courses on how to run webinars, and they are great, but also creating my own content where it needs to be. So Joe is doing this characteristic business of juggling the creation and the curation of content. Richard's attempting to understand what good curation looks like. It's a constant quality versus quantity conversation. We will come back to that, Richard. For me, it's all about quality. Cara, only little at the moment. Donald is doing my own curation, but also trying to develop a sharing culture. Jamie says uses skills profiles to build AI-powered learning pathways. It being, of course, Degreed. Mathieu is an LMS editor supporting manual creation and being in the process of integrating Anders Pink. I love Carl's answer, trying to simplify it. Look, Stephen, you're watching these answers come through. A really wide range of answers here. Some people doing stuff, quite engaged with it. Other people working the back end, like Mathieu is. And other people like Cara saying just starting to do it. Is that the sort of range of answers that you were expecting, Stephen?
It is. Good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join today, and thanks for starting by helping us to curate with some live curation of your answers and your experiences with curation. And yeah, I think that aligns very much to what I've seen over the last couple of years. Is a range of people who are stuck into it. Interesting to see several people talking about doing it for themselves as well. And I think we want to get into the etymology. Curation, it started in the museums, but the marketing people grabbed it pretty early on in the process about finding content and sharing it to build a brand and to build a personal interest. And I think it's, as often is the case, learning has cottoned on to what marketing is doing and starting to see the value in doing it as well. So a really interesting range of answers, and we'll try to pick up on some of those themes as we go through today.
Stephen, a number of people coming up with the idea that they're trying to use curation to stimulate a learning culture. Yeah. Jessica mentions it here. Is that something you've come across a lot?
Absolutely, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we get through today. I think it is one of the key things I think about curation is that it is, in essence, it's continuous, it's continual. You need to be doing it regularly, bringing in new content, stimulating discussion, and I think of learning culture as not really being about tools at all, and not even ours.
Yeah.
It's about humans having a reason to interact and to share and to learn, and content helps to grease the wheels of that, bringing in relevant content and then starting a conversation with people. And that can be as simple as saw this and thought of you, to use kind of hallmark terminology, but that's what gets that learning culture going. And absolutely, we'll talk about a few examples of people doing that.
And Donald echoes that, saying, yeah, we're trying to get that up and running too. Donald from Barcelona there. And then just one last comment. Catherine is saying, there is so much to filter as well. And you know what, Catherine, that's totally what it's about. Steve, any quick words on filtering before we press on?
Yeah, I mean, spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about filters and failures of filters and information overload a lot today, because we start with this thinking about all of us as individuals and what happens when you just go and Google something and you get X million results. It's not particularly helpful. So it's about how do you narrow it down and how do you make sure you're getting quality? And quality is obviously in the eye of the beholder. But let's talk about that and how you can apply good filters to do that today.
And interestingly, Catherine with a Y, as opposed to Catherine Chapman, Catherine with a Y and Anita both saying the same thing here. Catherine is saying, look, we're sharing useful finds in the team using Slack, and Anita saying, we create internal and external stuff, but it's manual, and it's difficult to determine if the content's best suited to our needs. In other words, it's a really time-intensive thing, and that's what I want to draw on a bit in the next few slides before we hand over to Stephen. I'm aware that everyone's on a clock here. Thanks for your time. Stephen, let's go to the next slide very quickly. What I'm trying to do in the following slides is to talk about very quickly a couple of, if you like, frameworks to think about curation from. Firstly, content. And the learning content pyramid is something I've come up with, I don't know, quite some time ago. But before that, let's talk about how content was in the past for learning and development. In the past, it was very simple, as in this, drawn from Clive Shepherd and Nick Shackleton-Jones. Basically, you generally created stuff internally, or you could externally commission it. There was a certain amount of stuff that was freely available, but we were focused on creating stuff. Next slide, Stephen. Things have changed over time, and we still have those three options available to us. But there are other ways of creating of content, there are other sources of content as well, which actually really dominate the content that's available to us. So the freely available stuff at the bottom of the pyramid here is the internet. The level above that is the generic outsourced libraries, people with 20, 30, 50,000 courses that you can have. At the top, we still have the externally commissioned stuff. Of course, people will go and buy stuff, and yet we still create stuff internally. But in the middle, there are these two big chunks of content sources that we don't tend to talk about enough in L&D. One is user-generated content, and the other, next slide, is to the right of that, curated content sets. And I just want to draw your attention to that. Now, I'm rattling through this, although this is actually a presentation in itself, this pyramid, because it's a tool I've been using a lot recently in talks, and it doesn't matter actually whether you're in Dubai, Warsaw, the Netherlands, or SIDCUP in London. Wherever I've talked about this, people are saying, yeah, that helps me understand what's going on. And also, I think crucially, helps people understand I don't have to create all my stuff myself. I think I'm probably preaching to the choir with people on the call here, that we don't have to create stuff ourselves. But this business of the curated content sets is an opportunity to take the heat off ourselves, to get off the treadmill of creating content, and rather to pick the best of what's available. So those content sets could come from the internet, could come from the outsourced libraries. It could be user-generated content. It could be anything internally. The point is it's put together in a coherent way. And to echo the points that people have made in the answer to that question, we're not talking about just getting a lot of stuff together in a box and giving it to somebody. We have to do more than that when we curate. And I loved the point of Anita, determining if the content is best suited to our needs. And Anita's absolutely right. What we're talking about is making sure that we're not just collecting stuff together, but we're adding value when we do that. So could you just, next slide please, Stephen. The first thing I wanted to look at then was this pyramid of content and the idea that there are different types of content. The other thing is something I've talked about for quite a long time, which is these 4 tasks of learning and development. Carl, look, I tell you what I'm going to do, Stephen, when I stop chatting and when I stop talking and you're talking yourself, Stephen, I'm going to pick up some thoughts like Carl's point on alignment with business goals, totally spot on, and we need to make sure that we answer that. So when we get to Q&A at the end, I will pick up these thoughts. So please do keep typing, and my job will be to pick those up and bring them up to Stephen. But I just want to look at the 4 tasks that L&D have traditionally always been involved in, and we still are today. And I'm not saying this is exclusive. We do other things as well. And yes, John says it looks like Harold's seek, sense, share model, which indeed Stephen will refer to later on. That's a great model. This is something which I think I was talking about independently of Harold many years ago. I don't claim it's particularly original by any means. But the point is, at each of these stages, we do something. We find information, we filter it together, we then make sense of it, we interpret it, not necessarily, but very often we do, and then we share it with the world. Okay, we used to do this in one particular way. Next slide, please. Well, I'm saying next slide, by the way, because I'm sharing, because Stephen's driving it from his laptop. Okay, so in the old days, how would you find the information? You had to go out and you had to find it. You had to collect information from various places, particularly interview subject matter experts, and then you would filter and interpret in one go as you created your training course. And then you would deliver your training course, and that's what we did. But we now live in a world of superabundant information. We can access almost the sum total of human information via a computer we have in our hands. The finding is not the difficult bit anymore. The filtering is crucial. The question is, do we find the right stuff, not any stuff? And so that's finding and filtering together. So the task of L&D has shifted. And I think this is a challenge to us in our perception of our role. I suspect that everyone in the room is kind of bought into the idea that we do not have to define ourselves by the fact that we create courses anymore. Rather, our job is to support the business and to help individuals fulfill their potential. We do that rather differently to this. So can we have next slide, please? This is my final slide, guys, and we'll get on to Stephen. Today, it's different. The finding and the filtering can be done automatically. We do not have to go out and do that ourselves. The distribution can also be done automatically. If you've got content, it absolutely is not an issue to get it out to people. The key thing is, what do we do in the middle? We need to set the filter. We need to set the criteria for finding. We need to set the criteria for filtering the best stuff. We need to add value in the interpretation. Not always, but very often we add value because that's what people get from it, and then we can distribute it. But that can be done automatically. The example for me is my global sentiment survey. I ask one question internationally to 2,000 people. I create a 44-page report from that. It's all about the middle bit of that, the interpretation, because that's what people want. They don't really care too much about the numbers. They want to ask, what do the numbers mean, and to get an answer from it. So just setting that as a sort of model to have in our minds, I'm going to hand you over to Stephen, who's going to drive the rest of it. I'm going to sit on chat, pick up points, and then hand them over to Stephen at the end, and we'll have a Q&A. If we can try to wrap up by about, 10 to, Stephen, so we can deal with Q&A,
yeah,
that'd be great. Stephen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Don, and that's really helpful context set both by you and I think by everybody's comments coming in as well about what does curation mean for people and how does it relate to their practical activities as learning professionals, and then practical tips how to do it, and that's very much what we want to talk about today. I am not going to go through this slide in detail. I know this looks like an L&D eye test, and I'm sure many of you have seen it before from Josh Burson, great influencer, along with Don on trends in this industry. The only point I want to make about it is we have come a long way. If you're a bit of an old dinosaur like me who started in this industry in the late 90s, you remember the days when it was e-learning, probably even CBT, when you were just creating courses using simple instructional design models, putting them maybe on an LMS, but often not just on CD-ROM, and that was kind of the beginning and the end of it. We've come a long way since then. We've moved through talent management, seeing the LMS evolve into a talent platform. Now we talk about learning experience platforms and LXPs. And now we're coming into understanding that learning needs to map to what the consumer experience is, what we all expect outside of the corporate learning environment of I want everything all the time, anywhere I want it. So we're trying to get there. Are we there yet? I suppose is the question. What Josh Burson calls learning in the flow of work, what some people call continuous workflow learning. This is the direction we're trying to get to. The reason I bring this up is because it's not just we want to get there because we're ambitious as learning professionals. We want to keep moving forward. Of course we do. But there are some real drivers that are making continuous learning incredibly important, I think, for society, if I can speak in those terms for a moment, and for the role of curation in driving those. So what are those things? Why does continuous learning matter? Let's answer that question, and then let's look at what curation has to do with it. I wish I'd come up with this phrase. I curated it for the purpose of this session. If you're not learning, you're not earning. So you've seen variations on this slides, and your mileage may vary. There's a lot of different measures of this out there, but the key point is the same. We have long careers. We're all going to live much longer than the generations before us did, which is fantastic, and we should all be delighted about that, but it also means we're going to work longer. The average tenure in a job, somewhere between 4.5 and 5 years. Obviously, it varies. The half-life of a learned skill, how long is the information that you know right now going to be relevant and applicable and useful to you as a skill? Gets shorter all the time. 5 years is a common standard. This is from Deloitte. Some people say in technology it's more like a year and a half, even less. So If you think of knowledge and skill as an asset, that asset, like every asset, depreciates and is worth less over time unless you reinvest in it. And that is why continuous learning, I think, matters hugely. We worry a lot, we talk a lot in the broader world about being fearful of AI and machine learning, and the bots are going to take all our jobs, and we're going to end up in Terminator 2. I'm more afraid of humans not continuously learning. And just to back that up, there's a great book I really recommend called Exponential Organizations. Sobering read about how quickly things change in business. And there's three stats on this slide. Again, competencies, shelf life of competencies declining massively from 1984 to now. But this one really blew me away. 89% of the companies on the Fortune 500 list that were dominant in 1955 are not on the list today. Not that they've dropped down the list, they're gone. They're gone. They're not in the top 500. And why is that? Sure, technology changes, businesses get disrupted, but learning, continuous learning, has a lot to do with it. And it's been called out, and we know, in L&D, we've hit the big time when The Economist is talking about what we're interested in. The Economist ran a special report on lifelong learning or continuous learning. The majority of people believing that it's essential to develop new skills through your working life. And the younger you are, the more relevant that is, because you've got more to run and more things are going to change under your feet before you even know it. So there is a compelling reason. I don't think it's just even about self-actualization to start at the top of Maslow's triangle. It's about survival. It is about continuing to grow and learn and survive and be relevant. And it's not just me saying this. Some business leaders are saying this. AT&T, we could have a whole session about the experience of AT&T and how they've reacted, evolved, and changed. AT&T, when they started, and I'm not that old, but I have read about it, had a patent to the telephone. And you would think if you're in the telecom business and you got a patent to the telephone, that's not a bad lead to have against everybody else. But things changed. Skype happened. Things like Adobe Connect that we're using today happened. We have different ways of connecting now that don't revolve around telephony. That's a challenge to organizations like AT&T. Randall Stevenson, their CEO, called out the underlying reason behind the challenge was learning. We're not learning. We had an old model for training that was we train you when you start and then you're kind of on your own, and we only train newbies. Completely shifted this model to now say this is about continuous learning. It's not about courses, not about formal episodic learning. And he's called out this mandate, if we don't spend 5 to 10 hours of the week staying on top of the fire hose of new information. Quite a violent phrase, but it's a good image I think to have in mind, and it goes back to what a couple of people said in the chat about information overload. You have to stay on top of it. You can't drink it all, but you need to be tapping into it. Otherwise, you're going to be heading into decline. And he's in good company. Satya Nadella at Microsoft saying a very similar thing. They don't want to hire know-it-alls. They want to hire learn-it-alls. The key skill is, what can you learn? Show us that you're a continuous learner. Show us that you are continuously developing yourself, and then you are attractive to us as a future employee and future leader. And down the road at Google, they say the same thing. I think they've invented this word, learnability, key skill for them. We hunt for learning animals. I get quite aggressive language from Google, but you get what they mean. We want people, it doesn't matter how good you are at coding or how good you are at SEO, you can learn those things. It's how good you are at learning. And I think that's a fundamental, I think it's a life skill. And I say it to my kids all the time. They are sick of hearing it. I don't care what you study as long as you're learning and as long as you build an appetite for learning over time. And when I talk to people in the room here today and talk to people around the world in L&D, the basic response is, we get that, we know that, we believe in it. It's hard. It's hard to change an organization's culture to be supportive of continuous learning. And I want to come alongside that. I don't want to pretend this is easy. And there are some challenges that stare us in the face every day as learning professionals. Here's just three. And if you've been in L&D for a while, these words are not new to you. Time and budget pressure. Everybody wants more, and they want it for less. So people want to support continuous learning, but they do not have the time or the budget. To go back to Don's original pyramid, you cannot respond to every need that emerges in the organization with a content creation mentality, i.e. we will go and build something for you, or we will buy something for you. You will be constantly chasing that tail, and you will run out of road pretty quickly in terms of a budget. Don, I think I said.
And Stephen, I know you're on a roll here, but I have to say, whenever I do a presentation, I always start with how's it going to the audience, and my second slide gives me a break, gives me a chance to tap into what the audience are thinking. Everything they say, it's always, well, we've got to do too much and we haven't got the time to do it. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. Those two things absolutely on people's minds in L&D, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. We hear it from surveys like the LinkedIn Workplace Learning Trends, which is what I have on the right of the screen there. 94% of employees saying, if only our company would invest more in us, we would stay here longer, which I know for a lot of L&D people, I feel your head banging against the wall as you say that, because the response is, we are investing in you. The problem is time. They don't have time. you don't have time to support them. So this time problem is not going to go away. So it's how can we be more efficient with the finite amount of time that we all have. Um, Finding relevant external content. So to contextualize where we're at with Anders Pink and what we focus on external content. We will get in, show you the tool, show you how it's used, show you some examples in a moment. But just if you picture curated content as either coming from repositories and libraries of courses or resources that you may have licensed or bought or built. There's a whole wide world out there. 3 million blog posts published every day, trillions of data available in the public web. It's about finding the relevant content in there. And someone, I think it might have been Catherine, said that is just hard work to do. People want to do it. And there's some great stats here from Towards Maturity and ICD saying, learners tell us that they learn more from external courses than from external sources than they do from courses. And that the Tridodal example is if you want to fix a plumbing issue in your house, you are not going to do a 1-hour learning course on plumbing. You're going to YouTube it and you're going to Google it and you're going to get the answer faster. People find it massively useful, but there's a big signal to noise disparity out there. People spend a lot of time, 9.5 hours a week, looking for information, not necessarily finding it. And I think the challenge to us as learning professionals is, well, what can we do about that? It's not our job to organize the entire world's information, but we can do something to help bring in relevant content to help people stay up to date on the things that matter to them. And the keyword is quality, relevant, timely content. We don't just want to add to the slush pile. We don't want to add more noise. We want to bring in good signals, and it's all about filtering that correctly, which we'll come on to in a moment. But that feeling, and a few people have talked about it, information overload on the way. I borrow this, as I said at the top of the hour. We learn a lot from the marketing profession, and I haven't, spent some time in both. Mark Schaefer, great writer about content marketing. If that's your bag, do look up his work. He came up with this phrase, content shock. Simply meaning there is just more content produced than we can ever hope to watch, see, listen, read, or stay up with. That feeling is never going away. We have only so many hours in the day, and the amount of content is growing exponentially through all of the outlets that are available. But I think it's actually got a few names. And if you've ever experienced something like this, you've had content shock. Type something like sales tips into Google, 180 million results. Good luck getting past page 1, even if the gold is buried in page 2. You're trusting Google's algorithm to serve up the best content, but do they really know what the best content is for you? Not better than you do, I would argue. There's another phrase that has been used to describe this. And I really like how Clay Shirky, another amazing writer, really interesting on the whole topic of echo chambers, information overload. We coined this phrase, filter failure. It's not that we're being overloaded by information, although it might feel like that. It's we're letting too much of the wrong stuff come at us. And that has psychological effects on it. It's stressful. If you've ever flicked through your phone and realized there's 100 updates, I'm never going to see them all, and you get that FOMO moment, that's what you're experiencing there. And they're probably not all relevant, but some of them are. So how do we get better control over the information that's out there for ourselves? Because we have to treat ourselves as learners as much as we do treat the rest of the organizations and the people that we serve. And then how do we do it for them as well? So I wanted to pause there and ask you a question. Many of you said you're trying to stay on top of the fire hose or of information or trying to stay up to date on things. How do you do it? What are your habits for continuously learning right now? Apologies for constructing an age-old multiple choice. You don't have to use the ABC. Put in your answers if you want, but do you go to your LMS or learning platform? Do you learn from others?
Yeah, let's look. I would say, yeah. Look, let's not have the letters. Let's have people's in-depth answers. How do you? I mean, Twitter is mine, to be honest. But I'm increasingly not on Twitter at the moment because I find it so annoying in so many ways.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. That's just between us, pals. Okay, you mustn't tweet that.
Nobody tell Twitter to Don.
Joe is saying Twitter network. Google and LinkedIn. Actually, LinkedIn, Carl, I agree. I find really useful for longer, more in-depth stuff.
Yeah.
Email subscriptions.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Okay, I find that interesting. I mean, to newsletters and so on. Does anybody else find that valuable? Because it can be great if you have the discipline to check it and read it.
Yeah, that's true. And so people saying, longer form reports, and I think that's right. And I think part of this is about timing your appetite, what frame of mind you're in. You might want a quick update. You might want to sit down with a cup of tea or coffee and go deeply into something.
I like a lot of people talking about professional networks. Mike is. Yeah. Other people were as well. Carmen raises a good point. A mixture of all of these, which leads to even more overwhelm, which is a fair point, Carmen. Margarita, again, giving a shout-out towards maturity.
Yeah.
Mike's saying RSS.
Yeah.
Real simple syndication, a real time saver.
Absolutely.
A lot of people talking, Cara, again, talking about professional networks.
Yep.
Both online and in real meetups.
Yeah.
That's true.
Absolutely. Really interesting, diverse range of answers. The one I didn't see, no surprise, the LMS or the learning platform, which, and I put it up there. I
Sorry, I
know,
shouldn't
nobody
laugh.
ever says A,
Of
but,
course.
I put it up there to be provocative because if we think, this is how we learn and we are learning professionals, but yet the majority of us inside our workplaces have a platform which we brand and we tout as the place where learning happens. And if that's not the place where people are going to find the latest information, I think we have to ask ourselves a question. Either put it somewhere else or make it the place where the latest, most recent, most relevant content comes into place. And it's not just us. And the answers there, I think, are you'll be reassured to find the learners that we serve say exactly the same thing that we all just said there. So this is from Jane Hart's Workplace Learning Survey from last year. Always find it a great read. I really like the fact that she goes straight to learners, asks them, from essential to not important, how do you like to learn? So top of the list, there's a couple of clusters. We don't have time to go through it all. I appreciate that's slightly small on the screen. Learning on the job, of course, knowledge sharing, like we're doing now, web search, professional communities, like we all said, web resources. Those are the cluster of the top 5. Down at the bottom, least ranked in terms of importance, relevance, classroom training, conferences, and e-learning. Now, this is not to say those things aren't important, but the question I would say is, if you think about the limited time and budget that we have as learning professionals, do we spend more on 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or more on 10, 11, 12? And I would contend many of the organizations I work with, they're shifting this balance, but the mainstay is still e-learning, classroom training, and conferences. It's not that those aren't important, but we need to do more. We need to do more because that's what people want. They want short, in the moment resources shared in the right channels and networks for them. And which brings us to the question of the LMS and the LXP. And the LMS industry is by no means dead. If anything, it's thriving and growing. But a lot of what we've seen, and we partner with a huge range of learning platforms and LXPs, is they are realizing they need to evolve. They need to become places where there is more traction, there's more engagement, there's more currency of content. They are not just repositories for courses and resources. There is new stuff coming through. And Joe, I've just noticed your comment. I'm loving seeing the new LXPs coming in as well, because they're coming from a completely different place. They are not saying, let's start with SCORM in mind. They are saying, how do we make this an experience that would sit alongside Netflix or Spotify or other consumer platforms that people are familiar with? So they're really shifting in the right direction. So those guys, those are changing, but also they're recognizing we need to be elsewhere. It can't just be all about the LMS or the LXP. People consume content in all the channels that we just mentioned, LinkedIn, Slack, other places as well. So what else should be in the ecosystem? So that's something we need to think about. So how does curation help with all of that? I've curated two definitions here, and I think they complement each other nicely. Rohit Bhargava, who talks about curation, I think really eloquently, really recommend his work. I won't read it out. You can read it for yourself, and you will get the slides and the recording afterwards. The key word in his definition, it's a continuous activity. It is about continually finding, grouping, organizing, and sharing the very best information that's out there for people. And Don, I think you bring that into a learning focus with your definition about presenting it for a specific audience and making it quick and easy. So for me, those definitions really merge together nicely. Someone mentioned Harold Jarkey in the chat. And this model, and I think it complements the 5 steps that Donald showed right at the start as well. Seek, sense, share. That Harold Jarkey, another great writer, Canadian writer, who's conceived of this model in terms of personal knowledge mastery. And I've talked to him, and he said it works really well for curation as well. So, with his blessing, let's talk seek, sense, share, and find filter fit into this really nicely as well. Just to break this down, what do we mean by this in practical terms? And this is completely independent of any tool. You can think about this however you want to go about doing it. I think you should use a tool. It doesn't have to be ours. There are many out there, but you should do something to help you with this process, particularly with this first step, seek. So seeking, and I don't need to tell a room of learning professionals this is, if you're going to curate content to help people continuously learn, question 1 is who? Who are we doing this for? Who in our organization will best benefit from this? And yes, the answer might be everybody, but you can't serve everybody all the time in the same way. Our recommendation is, and we've seen this work with many of our clients and partners, is start with a group. Start with a group who are naturally hungry, outward looking, and want to consume information. Sales teams are a great place to start. I've been a sales professional many times in my life. The most important thing for you is what's happening in my industry, what's happening in my competitors, what are my clients doing, what are my prospects doing. And if you can do that more efficiently for the sales team and bring that information to them, I guarantee you will be a hero. They may never think about it as learning, but they will think about it as actionable information. And that's, what a great place to be as a learning professional, be able to serve that up. Same for leadership teams and technical teams. And then ask them what they want. This is, it's a great way to change the conversation. This is not about saying we're going to need you to work with us to build a course and it's going to take you X months. You can be, to borrow this phrase, a content concierge. You can simply say to them, so what is it you want to see? If I could be a real concierge for you and bring you the right information at the right time and the right channels from the right sites and sources, what would you want? Then you start a dialogue with whoever is representing that audience. It might be a subject matter expert, it might be a team leader, it might be a range of different people from across geographies and across interests, but gather that information. That's where your seeking starts. And then once you've got that information, use tools. Use tools to help you seek and filter efficiently. And we'll show you ours just as one example in a moment. The key thing here, if you're going to go and curate content from the wider web, is you don't want your next step to be, I'm going to go Google this, because then you'll just experience that content shock that we talked about earlier. I spoke to a client of ours recently who said she'd just been put in charge of curation for the organization. And she said, and I think she was joking, she said, I think people think my job now is to go and read the internet for them and tell them what's happening today. Now, I know she was joking, but it is, I think there's a risk in trying to manually do this, is that you will drown. You will drown in the information. So let the machines do the seeking for you. Use tools and algorithms, and we'll show you how that works in a moment. Tools can help you to aggregate and organize content and filter it effectively, but sense making is an innately human activity. This is where humans and machines work really well together, because only humans can discern and identify true relevance for a particular audience. So if you read a piece of content, watch a video, listen to a podcast, and say, who would benefit from this? Why does this matter? And who would this help in the organization? And you maybe want to add a comment like, hey, I just saw this from our competitors. What does this mean for us, guys? Should we do something about this? Do we ignore? Now you're using that information to start to fuel a conversation. As someone said earlier in the chat, what about social learning? Well, this is social learning. You're bringing in content and then you're acting together to bring collective intelligence, to use that phrase, to say, what can we all do about this? Do we act on this? Do we store this for future reference? Do we curate insights? Do we involve other people? So this is the human element of the activity, sense making, right in the middle of it. And then sharing it. Doing all that work and then having that curated content in a place where nobody ever goes and sees it would be a terrible waste of time. So you've got to go where the eyeballs are, again, ruthlessly stealing from marketing speak, but where are people hanging out? Where do people get traction in your organization? That might be one place, a central place. It'll be different for different organizations, but it might well be more than one place. It might be Slack, it might be Yammer, it might be Teams, SharePoint, it might be your CRM. Who knows? It might even be the LMS or the LXP, and of course it should be. But the point is, be led by the traffic in the organization. You want your content to be wherever you need it to be. Someone mentioned good old email. Let's not forget a well-curated series of useful content sent around on an email to people that could be incredibly valuable and just in the right place at the right time and the right channel for them. So there's no hard and fast rules about those. In the book, we go into lots of details about pros and cons of these channels and things to consider, but you need to think about all of them and think about the right place. Putting content into another place, don't copy and paste. You don't have the time to do that. There are better ways of doing that. That's what APIs, in simple terms, ways of connecting one application to another. Smart integrations take care of that for you. They will automate the integration and the display of content from one place to another. So you can leave the machines to do that, and you can focus on the really important stuff, adding sense, adding value, and then helping people to build a habit. 10 minutes a day, that's what we recommend to people. If you invest 10 minutes a day reading, looking, listening to something different that you wouldn't have discovered yesterday, over a year, that will add up to a week. And what a fantastic investment to make in yourself, and what a great way to change an organization's culture, to say, this is not about taking you off the road for a week. This is about little and often and building those muscles, the same way that you would, if I ever did it, go to the gym. You don't go for a week and then say, now I'm fit. You go every day, stay up to date, keep feeding your appetite for more learning. So I'm going to show you one way of doing it. I'm going to jump into our tool. As I say, there are plenty of tools out there. We're just going to show you one, just for example, so you can just get a flavor of what we're talking about when we talk about going to look at external content. So let me come into the Anders Pink platform here, anderspink.com. You can just come in, have a look yourselves, get in touch with us. We're very happy to set you up with a free trial, so you get a sense of how it all works. What we do in here is we create what we call briefings. Briefings are feeds of content from the external web with a series of rules that you create and define exactly what you want to see and where you want to see it from. I'll show you just in a little Blue Peter mode what one looks like here. So here's one I made earlier. All I've done here, I'll just recreate it from scratch, is let's say I'm interested in a particular topic. It can be absolutely anything. I'm going to say I'm interested in AI. I'm also interested in big data, say for example. So we have an algorithm that will go out to the public web, look for content that's been published on these topics. So the algorithm's doing a bunch of stuff, and if you've got technical questions, let me know and I'll explain. But quickly, we're looking at recency, how well shared the content is, where the content is from, authority of the content, and obviously matching the key terms that you're looking for. So think of it as a smart way to efficiently search on a particular topic. I put in two broad topics here, AI and big data. There's a lot written on those two topics and a lot published every day. Let's say I'm particularly interested in these topics through a certain lens. So I'm interested in HR because that's the topic that I'm particularly interested in. And now I want to see it from particular places. So I can say I want to see it from everywhere on the web, or I want to see it from 6,000 particular business sites. And we curate these lists in the background of top sites for business, sales, leadership, marketing, technology. We're adding all the time to those lists.
Stephen, can you also exclude things as well?
Yeah. So you can down here, you can say not from these sites. You can also say, I'm interested in HR, but I'm not particularly interested in machine learning, say, for example. So yeah, you can do exactly that, Don. And you can also say, I have my preferred list of sites and sources. So in this example, I've said, for whatever reason, these are the 3 sites I really, really want to see content from and nowhere else. So this is going really narrow. This is now saying, I'm interested in this and this, but only if it's about this and not if it's about this, and only from these 3 places. And these can be Twitter handles, RSS feeds, websites, blogs, podcasts, videos, anything that's publicly available on the web. So I know I'm going through this quick, but you can come on, spend some time doing this yourselves on the tool. It maybe takes 10, 15 minutes to build a good briefing, get it the way you want to, decide how you want to do it with a subject matter expert, and then get it the way you want to. And you can do it in multiple different languages as well. So I know we have a French colleague on the phone today. Here's one in French. So looking for content on, excuse my pronunciation, le big data and artificial intelligence, looking for it in French, looking for it from top business sites, just in French. So you can do it in multiple languages, French, German, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Chinese, more languages being added all the time. The key thing is once you do this, and this is where it's a bit different from Google. So some people say, well, can I just search for this stuff? You can. Once you make a briefing in Anders Pink and it's live, it will update every 4 hours. So we will go back out to the web, look for content that matches whatever rules and whatever you told it to do, and it will just bring it immediately into your briefing for you here. So I've just gone into this example team here. So they've set up a range of different ones. As you can see, it can be on any topic you want to. This one happens to be on sales. It's picked 30 websites and blogs. This will now update content from a week ago, 3 days ago, 24 hours ago. I can obviously then just go and do so this is doing the seeking for me. The machine is looking for the content, bringing it in exactly the way that I want to. Now I should do my sensing. So I should go and look at the content. We'll just open it up in a new window for me, and I can go and read it. Then I can add a comment to it. I can say, this is really interesting. This is great. I can flag someone else in the team here. It's just a trial team. So I'll just annoy Joe by saying, check this out. And I can share it, and we have to think about building our own brands as individuals as well. You can share it to social networks. You can share it straight to LinkedIn if you want to. So if I wanted to put this straight on my LinkedIn, it'll just pop it up into a new window, and I can share it from there. And I can train the briefing over time. So we have a light layer of AI here, because you might want to set up a very broad briefing to start with and say, I don't really know what I want to see yet. Just bring in lots of stuff. And then I will just say, I want to see less like this. I want to see more like this. So I can train this briefing to say, bring me more content like this, bring me less like this. In the background, machine learning will learn from your preferences and anyone who interacts with the briefing to say, okay, we get it. You're interested in coaching, but you're not interested in high performance coaching. So we'll hide articles like that. Exactly. So you can either invest the time up front to make it really specific and narrow, or go broad and just train it over time. Or you can do both. And we see clients doing both of those things. So seek it out, read it, share it, train it, save it. And this is an important facet as well. If you want to hold on and start building a curated knowledge base from different sources and say, these are the best of the best, that extra layer of curation that you or others in the team can do, you can do that as well. But really what's important, I can spend, of course, as you can imagine, all day showing you how this works, is you don't just want it to be in here. Of course, you can use our app, you can use it desktop, you can use it on mobile versions as well. You can either get from the App Store or Android. But really what it's about is share it inside the channels where your audience are already working. So the vast majority of our clients and partners are saying, we want this in our LXP, in our LMS, in our Slack channels, in our Microsoft channels, wherever we want it to be. And that's exactly what we're doing with the tool. So let me come on and show you just what that looks like when people are actually sharing it in practice. Let me just come back into my slides here. So complete control, AI powered, automatic updates, helps you stay up to date, and then you can put it wherever you want to. So how are people actually doing this alongside everything else they're doing in terms of their learning and curation strategies? Well, they're putting it inside their platforms. Cat Marine, a client of ours through our partner Kineo, embedding it directly into their tutor. Now, someone mentioned in the chat, I noticed niche content. It's hard to get more niche than what organizations like these do. So they are deep into tug, salvage, fishing, remote vessel technology, the kind of stuff that when you go doing broad internet searches for it, you're going to get frustrated around it. So they've worked with their subject matter experts to say, what are the authoritative sites and sources around the world on this particular topic? Let's build a briefing on those. Now let's embed it inside the LMS so that when people are learning about these particular topics in terms of formal courses and other content, they're also getting trending news about these topics as well. They've added a really ingenious extra layer, which is they then look at the content that gets the most engagement and they make a little podcast about it. So they say, this week in Tug and Salvage, they have a better name than that for it, these are the things that are really catching people's eye. So let's talk about them. Let's tease them out a little bit more. And my reflection on that is, what a great way for an L&D professional to spend their time. Rather than laboriously sifting through content from the web, let that be automated. Let the great stuff come to the top by, with the wisdom of other people looking at it and engaging with it. And then let's talk about it. Let's have a little internal conversation. Let's create a podcast and then create another resource that rounds it up for people. So I think they're a really, really interesting example of people doing something really smart with it. Conscious of time, and I know I'm firing through these quickly, but we can answer some more in the Q&A about it as well. Leadership, we see a lot of organizations, and I'm sure you work with many of them, everyone on the call, who have flagship leadership programs, that might be 2-3 months of a blended program with lots of great components within it. The challenge with those is often when they're over, they're over. And there's one financial services client who wanted to say, how do we keep people engaged? How do we keep this cohort alive? How do we keep people learning about this? They've created a series of briefings on very specific aspects of leadership, so agile leadership, leadership in EQ, employee engagement, bake them into their LXP. So we've worked with a partner to get them inside their mobile LXP, but also they have people who hang out on Yammer and they have people who hang out on SharePoint. So it's in all of those places as well, in slightly different formats, in different guises for slightly different audiences. But the point is, curate it once, publish it, share it in as many different places as you want to. Again, back to that point, go to where the eyeballs are. And if some of them are in one place, some of them are in another, serve them both. So they're doing a really nice job on it. Scania, truck haulage company, again based in Sweden. Really interesting set of portals. They've got some academies that they run on leadership for L&D, sustainability, and so on. Each one of those has a specific briefing attached to it. As you can see, it looks very different from our app. You can style it whatever way you want to, and visuals matter. I totally agree. So they've done a little bit of styling to bring it in this particular format, but they're also adding comments in here. So they add a little rollover comment that says, this is why we've picked this piece of content. This is why we think it's relevant for you. So again, SMEs and learning professionals adding that sense-making layer, letting the machine do the finding and the filtering for you, and then embedding it deeply within the platform so that they stay up to date. And as they say, this is not about replacing legacy content. This is about complementing it, running alongside. So we're bringing in the latest and greatest content. I promised myself I would not talk about Brexit today, but I've stumbled into it anyway. So another client, Enterprise Ireland, I can show you this because this is a live site. I think I've got it up running in the background. So Enterprise Ireland, Irish government body who organise content around leadership and growth for their client organisations. They're handling the topic of Brexit. Brexit, as we all know, changes under our feet, every day or so. So they have some formal content on Brexit, some talking head videos, but it's hard to stay up to date, producing content on a regular basis at this level of quality and this level of intensity. So what they have embedded into their site, and this is a public site, anyone can go to it, is right down at the bottom, recommended reading. This is an Anders Pink briefing inside their platform. So they have just created a briefing exactly the way I showed you a few moments ago. They've said, we want an Irish angle on this for the audience that we're serving. We want to see it from certain sites, and we wanted to update, and they've set, what rate they wanted to update at. I think they've set it to update every day or every 2 days. So as you can see, this content's just embedded directly into their platform. Their users, people coming to this platform, if they want to go and have a look at any of this content, if they click on it, it will just bring them straight to the content. The Anders Pink is invisible, and we're absolutely fine with that. We're in the background. This is white labeled into their site. We want it to be as seamless and easy as possible for users. So there's no single sign-on. There's no go over here and log in, etc., etc. You're straight into the content to help you stay up to date and continuously learn. So that's what Enterprise Ireland are doing with it. Brexit is just one example. They're doing it on about 25 different subjects. They've got it worked into all of their blended programs with a specific briefing for every single one of them. And for them, it is about saving time. They know that content is out there. They know, yes, we could go Google it and bring it in, but why would we? We don't have the time. We don't have the time, and our clients don't have the time. So let's just organize it for them and help them stay up to date. Lots of different ways you can style it. There's another partner who's embedded it into their app. They allow people to follow a topic in the app, which is they've got about 100 different topics in there. Each one of them is a briefing curated in a very specific way for them. Fantastic partner. We were just talking to them yesterday. They may be on the call. It's early on the West Coast, but Toolwire are doing an amazing job integrating into their great platform. They've done something super cool. We're seeing lots of partners move in this direction. Is embed the Anders Pink tool inside the platform itself. So there's a widget in their platform. You click on the button, and you can create a briefing within the platform. You don't even have to go to the Anders Pink tool to do it. So you can do that as a course admin or as a course author, and then map it against competencies and drop that AI-powered briefing wherever you want to inside the tool. So they're doing a great job with them. Definitely ones to watch, or getting way ahead of the game in terms of how this stuff goes. It's not all about LMSs and LXPs, of course. I'm sure many of you using Slack or alternatives to Slack in your organizations. I think Slack is a stealth learning platform. It's where we're hanging out. It's where we're doing a lot of our social interaction and our social learning, even though we might not think of it as such. So why wouldn't you put great content in there as well? So we built a really simple integration for Slack. You can just say, send this briefing to this channel on Slack, bring in 3 pieces of content or 5 or 1 if you want. It will update every morning, 8 a.m., bring in a new piece of content for you. And then you can do all the good stuff you can do in Slack with it, save it, start a conversation, do all of that over in Slack. So again, this is about go to where the people are hanging out. If Slack's the right channel for your organization, curate content and build it into your Slack channel or wherever else it might be. So a range of examples. Let me anticipate this question. I'll flick through the chat as well. As so what? Why would you do this? What's the ROI? Well, there's a couple of things, and Don, I know you've got views on this as well. It'd be great to hear your thoughts. This is what we hear from our clients. This is the big challenge that first challenge we said, time and cost. One client we spoke to said, look, our default model was if someone needs something, we will either create or buy a piece of learning for it, which is a perfectly natural response to it. But that gets timely, that gets expensive. Even if you're buying libraries of content, that can be expensive, and if you're making them, it's even more expensive. They just set a rule. They said, look, who are we to say that we know everything that there is to know about, effective leadership or big data or AI? There's great content out there. Why can't we just curate the best content that's relevant? And then we can wrap around it. We can add our own thoughts and insights. And if something really needs to be specific to us, then we make that, but we don't make all of it. So 25% is their standard now for saying curate from the web before you go to create, think curation first. They're saving a huge amount of time. As you saw, those briefings are very quick to create. And they're saving 3 months per topic. And really importantly, and I know you want to come in on this, Don, it's not just about the cost saving, it's about changing the culture. And it's back to that point and Sam Taylor from Hitachi Rail said, this is about helping people to think we don't do learning to you, we enable you to learn for yourself in small doses, 5 to 10 minutes a day, and that's how we're changing the culture. Don, do
and my very quick bit is, for me, this is what it's at. It's about using this as for 2 things. Firstly, to change the culture of the organisation and shift people towards those individuals themselves and their managers to thinking, yes, this is my time when I'm picking up on the latest news and it's vital for my job. Yeah. And it may be background information or it may be something immediate for my work I need. The other thing is that it helps L&D get off the content treadmill of creating courses willy-nilly for everything to focus on the area where it's worthwhile creating courses when you want people to change their behaviors in particular ways, and you can focus on that rather than using courses to deliver information, which they're really rather poor for. Look, Anita's asked a great question about can you show you've changed culture. I'm going to not get in your way, Stephen. Carry on. Yeah. I'll pick that up, Anita. Hopefully I'll Stephen at the end if we have time for it.
That sounds great. Yeah, and just quickly looking through the chat and seeing what people ask about, and I think and Mike Taylor, who's on, and we've met before. Mike, great to have you on again. Great curator in his own right. And he makes a really good point, which is this is not about automating and aggregating everything. That humans are absolutely fundamental to this process. It is about freeing up our time as learning professionals to say, let us focus on making sense, organizing content, curating insights, and adding value to that. That to me alone is an ROI. It is freeing us up to do better things with our time and serve our organizations better as we do it as well. Just quickly, and then let's go to questions. As I said, for us, we are not an LXP. We are not an LMS. We never ever will be. Our goal is to play nicely and plug into all of the great platforms that are already out there. Some well established, some new ones on the block that are coming through as well. Through these, and we've got probably another 40 partners that will be added to this list very soon. We're able to enable people to access well curated and aggregated content natively inside these platforms to over a million learners, and a range of great organizations that we're very, very fortunate to get to serve, who are taking this seriously, who are saying this is a core part of our L&D strategy. It is not just about creating content, it is about bringing curation into the mix as well. So we're fortunate to work with them. Question I get asked a lot, and maybe it's been in the chat, I'll quickly put it up and then I will stop talking, is, okay, so where do we start? Where do we start? If you believe in this, where do we start? Well, start, I think, with a principle, with a rubric. And whether you say we should do this 30% of the time or 20% of the time, do it some of the time. Just think curating as well as creating. And I know that's a broad term to use, but it doesn't have to be about buying, licensing, building. It can be about bringing the best content in, even if you just start with one audience. And a great audience to start with, sales teams. As I mentioned, sales teams, I think, are naturally inclined to think in this way. They are active on social media. They are always looking for an edge, for an insight. And if you can help them, that's a great position for us to be in as learning professionals. Leadership teams, likewise. So much is written and published about leadership, and we probably all look at Harvard, Forbes, Entrepreneur, and a few other sites, but there's also a lot of great niche sites out there as well that we can tap into, organize for leaders in our organizations. A lot of our clients and partners will start by saying, let's map against the core skills or the competencies that we've got in the organization so that we can serve up recommendations. And our good pals at Filtered, talk really eloquently about this, Mark Finn and the team. Recommendations, I think, is a great word to use in this context, which is, if you're curating effectively, you are effectively serving up great recommendations to people aligned to the skills that they're either developing or that they aspire towards. Platforms. This is where a lot of our conversation starts with partners, is we want to drive up traffic on our platform. We've invested heavily in our LXP or LMS. We want people to be in there for the right reasons, and bringing in fresh content is a great way for doing that. Niche and technical content. If you know that there are audiences who struggle to get attention in your organization, maybe it's long tail content that you don't readily have the budget or the time to address, you can curate content for them by using the right sites and sources and ask them where to bring that content. Fueling social learning, we've already talked about, I think, along the way, and enhancing a content offer. If you've got a core set of courses and you want to just augment them by adding additional content around it, you can use curation to do that. Many other serving suggestions, and we write a lot more about these in the book. But I will say, and this is a photograph I took of Don a little while ago when he was a fantastic concierge in no, it's not, it's Ralph Fiennes, but it's time to unleash your content curation concierge. Try saying that quickly 5 times. Something to help you out. We've written a book on this, as Don has kindly mentioned, where we go into a lot more detail around the principles, the tips, the best practices around how to do this. Lots more examples in there. That's a free download on our site. We'll drop the link into the chat in a moment. But also a great way to get started. Try it out. We're happy to give anybody on this call a free trial to the tool. Just get in touch with us. Michelle's there in the chat. Just drop her a line, or just come onto the site and you can just contact us. We will set you up, get you started, and help you have this experience. Not just for yourself, because I think you've got to start with yourself first, but also to help the other people in your organization. I promise now I will stop talking, Don. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time. We've got a few minutes, I think, for chat. Don, anything coming up through the chat as I want
to just make it quite clear that was Ralph Fiennes and not Donald H. Taylor, sadly. Okay, so, and it is a great movie, Richard, you're right. Look, firstly, Stephen, fantastic webinar, thank you so much. Loads and loads of content there, probably actually 3 webinars worth on reflection. I think, firstly, can I just get people's reaction? Would you like to hear more from Stephen about curation in general and ways of doing it? And if so, should we delve down in future webinars in a bit more detail? My guess is yes. Yes, Joe's got to go. Thank you very much, Joe, for coming around. So please let us know in the chat area if there is more that you think you get out of Stephen. For me, the answer would be certainly yes. Quick question there from Anita. She was saying, look, how can you tell if you've shifted the culture? It's difficult, but come on, is there a metric? What have we got, Stephen?
Yeah, it's a great question. How can you tell if the culture has shifted? I suppose you've got to observe habits. You've got to observe what people are doing differently.
Yes.
And are they, and we see a lot of our clients using Google Analytics to track this stuff. And the great thing about this type of content is you can be very granular about what people are doing, how much time they're spending at it, what they're looking at, and then what they're doing next. Again, learning from marketers. So if you're starting to see the needle shift from maybe less people are completing courses or asking us, can you build any learning module around this? And they're saying, can you just get me some great content on this? That's a big sign that the culture is shifting. And I think, and look at where people are sharing it as well. Because, and I should have said this more clearly, it's not just about us as learning professionals sharing it. It's about encouraging people to share with each other as well. And this is a hugely democratic process. And, if you can start to see that collective intelligence build where people are, almost picking up the ball for you and saying, hey, look at this content, listen to this video, or listen to this podcast, let's talk about this together. Then you got that flywheel, to borrow that phrase, going where people are actually now curating for each other and helping each other. That to me would be the strongest sign of a culture change.
Okay, I like that. Now, Miriam says, I'm a bit worried when I hear content. In my organisation, people are super overwhelmed.
Yep.
Not just overwhelmed, but super overwhelmed.
Yep.
So Miriam's point, I guess, if I can paraphrase, is, look, aren't we just adding to the problem, giving them more content? Stephen?
Yeah, let's talk insights. Let's not talk content, because I think you're right. Content, Miriam, could just be adding to the pile of things that I'm never going to get to read that will disappear below the fold. And what I say to people is, it is not about more content. It is about relevance. So if you're saying, I have got one thing I recommend for you to read, listen to, or share this week, and just one thing only, you're doing a much better job for them than saying, here's 35 more things that you probably will never get to. So yeah, I think we could be more nuanced, probably as an industry, in terms of that word. Content can cover an array of sins. Let's talk about insights, relevance, timely, useful, actionable information, and think about less really is more, to borrow that phrase, but I think it is here.
I think in my tweet about this, I said, in the age of information superabundance, our role is not to create more content, but to provide more insight, or something like that. Yeah. I'm trying to summarize what you're saying. Okay, look, so Vivian asks, hey, this is great, but how do I get hold of the slides in the chat? The recording will be available should we say from next week, to give us time to get it sorted out. And Stephen, am I correct in saying it'll be available from the Anders Pink website?
Yeah, we'll put it up, and we'll share it out from there as well. So yeah, come back to our site. I think we've got everyone's mail addresses come in as well, so we'll personally follow up with you all to make sure that.
And we'll stick it out on Twitter as well. Carmen saying, look, we don't have an LMS or an LXP, so where are we going to curate this content to? I want to put it in somewhere, but where can I put it? Stephen?
I guess I would turn the question back to you, Carmen. Where do people get work done in your organization? And that's where you should start. And if that is, as I mentioned, it might be email, or it might be in a CRM, or it might be, we have SharePoint. There is somewhere where there are hubs of exchanges happening in organizations. That's where you should start. I would I don't think this is about leading with technology. And I know, there's a great phrase from Thomas Tungus. He says, one of the hardest things about any new form of learning or cultural technology is getting a share of habit. If you're asking people, hey, have we built this yet another platform for you that you've got to go to and get this stuff, that can create friction. So I would, take a ninja move, go in where people are already hanging out and bring it subtly in there, and then build out from there. And then you'll get the traction.
Yeah, going where the people are again, it's a familiar story, but it's the right one. Quick question: if we are looking at some tools, we're using some tools to collect the content. Carl sort of raised this, but I'm paraphrasing. Is there a risk that we will introduce bias by going with content that is highly recommended on engines where I don't know, particular political views may be recognised?
It's a really great point. It's a really great point. And Carl Shirky writes great content about this echo chamber. The fact is, and it's one thing we've kind of designed into the tool is to say, you can manage bias and avoid bias by being diverse about the sites and sources that you choose. So, I've done this with a few experimental feeds. I've said, okay, I want to see a balanced political one. I want content on Brexit, and I want it to come from these these political views and these political views, and I want them to be balanced in there. So we negate out any kind of Google ranking where only the stuff that's the
You said you weren't going to mention Brexit. Now you've mentioned it twice. I mean, how am I supposed to get to sleep tonight?
Or any other subject. But yes, but you can manage against bias, and I would really encourage you to do that. I think that's a really, and we talk about this a lot in the book, is when you are building a briefing and thinking about where do I want to see this content from, be broad. Don't just go to, I always look at Harvard, I always look at Forbes, I always look at 4 or 5 sites. There are other ones out there, and we can help you find them. And I didn't even get to show you that feature, but we will surface different sites that you may not have heard of, and you can look at them and say, not for me, or actually this is interesting, and you can keep it or remove it. So you can make them very, very balanced and keep them nice and broad as well, and then refine them over time.
You've been mentioning the book quite a lot. We have to wrap up shortly. Stephen, would you be okay if I just drop the URL for the book into the chat?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, by all means. Thank you, John.
Okay, so there's a 120-page ebook for free, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
There it is. There's the URL on Curation. It is certainly worth reading. Listen, it's gone 4 o'clock in the UK, 11 o'clock East Coast, 9 o'clock on the Pacific Coast, and clocking off time in Europe, 5 o'clock. So I'm going to pull us all to a halt here, but I sense that everyone could keep going for a while. So look, Carmen says it. Excellent webinar. Thanks for all the great ideas, Stephen. It has been loads there. I rather suspect we're going to get Stephen back to do more of this because, goodness me, what a very experienced person who can certainly put over a lot of information. Getting Stephen back to do that later on. So thanks everyone in the room for your input. Loads of stuff, interesting ideas and thoughts being shared. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you to our speaker today, Stephen Walsh of Anders Pink. You've got his contact details there. And you can also contact, who's also been on the call, Michelle, also from Anders Pink. And here is her email address. And don't forget the book. The URL is there as well. So I will sign off shortly. Just want to say the recording will be available on the Anders Pink website. Thank you very much for attending. And Stephen, thank you very much for a great webinar.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, everyone, for your time. Have a great rest of the day and look forward to catching up again soon.